Today we're diving into some seriously big ideas about reality itself, like what it is,
Yeah.
how we wrap our heads around it, and why your own perspective might be more important than you think. We're talking about different models of reality and how different fields of study try to make sense of it all. And we're going to dig into some seriously mind-bending concepts like this thing called the Ouroboros model. So first things first, this Ouroboros model, what's the deal with that? I'm picturing like a snake eating a pizza or something, but I have a feeling it's a bit more complicated than that.
Well, you're not wrong about the snake part. It's actually a metaphor picture, a snake eating its own tail. That's the Ouroboros. And in this case, it represents how everything is connected, especially when we're trying to understand reality.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So it's not just about looking at, say, physics or biology on their own.
Exactly. Think of it like a circle, right? That Ouroboros snake. Along that circle, you've got physics, biology, psychology, even art and math. The authors of this material we're looking at, they use this image to show how each field is really just one piece of the puzzle.
So no one discipline has all the answers.
Well, yeah. It's easy to forget, though. Like, you've got Platonists who basically think math is the foundation of everything, ideas over matter. And then there's biological materials all about the brain. And then you've got those origin of life researchers, right? Totally obsessed with those very first chemical reactions.
Each one is like starting at a different point on that snake, but they're all still on the same loop, right?
Yeah.
I'm guessing that leads to some interesting conversations.
Oh, big time. The authors actually call it each discipline's Shiva, this tendency to kind of undermine its own foundations. Like, the more we learn, the more we realize what we don't know.
Okay, now that is interesting. So it's like the more we learn, the less we actually know.
In a way, yeah. For example, the more we understand about how the brain works, the more we realize just how much our brains themselves might be skewing our research.
Whoa, okay, my brain needs a break already, and we're just getting started. But seriously, if every field has these blind spots, these Shivas, where does that leave us? How are we even supposed to approach these big questions about reality?
That is the million-dollar question. In this material we're looking at, it suggests there's not one right answer. It's more about acknowledging that we all have our own starting point on that Ouroboros, based on our backgrounds, our experiences, how we think.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
So whether I'm drawn to the elegance of math or I'm all about the tangible world of biology, it's more about realizing that my lens might be limiting my view.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. By trying to understand those other viewpoints on the Ouroboros, even the ones we don't naturally gravitate towards, that's how we can get a richer, more complete picture of reality.
So we're talking about really expanding our horizons here. But I gotta admit, all this talk about disciplines undermining themselves, it's making me a little uneasy. Like, is everything we think we know wrong?
It's a common feeling, but it's not about throwing out everything we know. It's about understanding the limitations. And that's where complexity science comes in.
Yeah, you're gonna have to break that one down for me.
Sure thing. So imagine you're trying to understand a city, right?
Okay.
You can study its traffic patterns, its architecture, its history.
Right.
But to really get it, you got to see how those things interact, how they influence each other.
Yeah. It's not just about the buildings, it's about the people living in them, working in them, visiting them.
Exactly. And that's kind of what complexity science does for reality. It's like, hey, instead of getting stuck on which discipline is right, let's look at how all these different levels interact and create something bigger.
So instead of getting lost in the weeds of one specific field, complexity science wants us to zoom out and look at the bigger picture, see how everything fits together.
Exactly. Think of each discipline, physics, biology, psychology, like a different tool. Each one is useful, right?
Right.
But none of them can give us the full picture on their own. Complexity science is about using all the tools in the box,
So it's about embracing the interconnectedness of it all. I'm starting to see how this ties back to the Ouroboros, right? It's not just this random collection of disciplines, but a continuous loop where each part influences and is influenced by the others.
Yeah, and the source material actually uses another metaphor to kind of drive this point home.
Yeah.
They talk about this Vedic concept of Trimurti.
Okay, gotta admit, Vedic concepts aren't exactly my area of expertise.
I hear you. Basically, in Hinduism, Trimurti represents these three fundamental aspects of reality creation, preservation, and destruction.
Sounds intense.
It is, but here's the thing. They're not seen as separate forces, but different expressions of a single unified reality. Kind of like that Ouroboros, always eating its own tail.
I see. So it's not about picking sides, but about understanding how all the sides work together.
Right. We need to move beyond this idea of these disciplines being separate entities, constantly battling it out. Instead, let's look for the connections, the overlaps, the ways they inform and enrich each other.
It's like when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, right?
Absolutely.
This whole Ouroboros model is pushing us to shift our perspective from a fragmented view of reality to one that's more holistic and interconnected.
And that shift can be powerful.
Mm.
It allows us to appreciate the complexity of the world without getting bogged down in the limitations of a single viewpoint. It's about acknowledging that there's always more to learn, more to discover, and that even ideas that seem contradictory can actually coexist and contribute to a greater understanding.
You know, this is kind of blowing my mind a little bit, but in a good way. It's like we're getting permission to embrace the unknown, to be okay with not having all the answers, and to just find beauty in all the different ways people try to understand the universe.
I love that. That sense of wonder, that willingness to explore, those are crucial for any kind of meaningful inquiry into the nature of reality.
So we've journeyed through all these different ways of seeing the world, right?
Right.
We've kind of embraced this idea that everything's connected.
Yeah.
And I think it's safe to say our minds have been blown a little bit along the way.
At least a little.
So where do we go from here? What are we supposed to do with all of this?
That's the great thing about a deep dive like this, right? It's not really about giving a definitive answer. It's more about giving you new ways to look at things.
So it's not about the answer, but about asking better questions.
You got it.
Yeah.
And this Ouroboros model, with this whole emphasis on the cyclical nature of knowledge, it encourages us to constantly question our assumptions, be open to new perspectives, embrace the fact that our understanding of reality, it's always evolving.
Like we're on this infinite loop of learning, always coming back around with new insights, a deeper understanding.
You remember how we were talking about choosing a starting point on that Ouroboros? Whether we lean towards math, biology, some other discipline, right? The authors, they leave us with this final thought. If reality really is a circle, can we ever truly grasp all of it? Or are we always going to be limited to seeing just our little segment, bound by where we choose to start and those blind spots we talked about?
It's like you're a character in a book and you suddenly realize you're on the page. You can see you're part of the story, but you can't see how it all fits together.
Such a good way to put it. And I think that's such a powerful image to keep in mind. It reminds us to stay humble, right?
Yeah.
To be open to being surprised. Keep searching for those connections that help us understand the universe and our place in it.
Wow, we really covered a lot today, from the limits of different fields to, like, the very nature of reality itself. My brain is definitely full.
Mine too, but in a good way.
The best way. But hey, that's the thing about these big questions, right?
What's that?
There's always more to explore. So until next time, everyone, keep those minds open and those questions coming. And a huge thanks to our expert for guiding us on this incredible journey. This has been awesome.
Anytime. It's been a pleasure.